Christmas time, Jesus face, punch you in the dick. Everybody, buy stuff, I feel sick. Pig Destroyer? Oh, come on, that's a terrible name for a grindcore band. One look at how much pork is in your average supermarket and you'll realize just how easy it is to destroy most pigs. Hell, I'm destroying a pig even as I record this. 0 out of 10, not brutal, worst of the year. Oh, wait, they're using pig as a euphemism for cop here? Okay, never mind, forget I said anything. Waka waka waka. Yeah, Pig Destroyer's back, that's cool, right? It's been about 5 or 6 years since we heard anything from them, and with Headcage, they've really come back in full form. Man, this album was an absolute stampede. Pig Destroyer have been a notable name in the grind, extreme metal scene for quite a while now, and on this album they've really proven to us why. J.R. Hayes does have one of the most pleasingly visceral shouts across the genre, and you can practically hear the blood pouring from his throat on this record. It's great. One of the things I particularly like about his voice is that, uncommon for a lot of vocalists of his type, he's actually fairly coherent. I mean, his scream is loud and intense, but if you're listening close enough, you can actually make out what he's saying. Not that that's the most important thing in this particular genre.
We got any songs with Destiny in the title?
No, but I can stick it, it doesn't matter, no one can understand what I'm saying anyway.
But you know, I'm kinda glad I can make out what he's saying, because Pig Destroyer's lyrics actually aren't half bad. I mean, it's still essentially grindcore, so the lyrics are mostly. But there's more than a few songs of some genuine substance on this record, like Army of Cops and Trapdoor Man, which make interesting points on the American fetishism with the police state mentality. I would expect nothing less from a band with this name, and Trapdoor Man, which does have some interesting things to say about how divided we are as a people lately and how easy it can be to become demonized in today's society. I mean, it's not like Dostoevsky or anything, it's still grindcore at the end of the day, but hey, I've always appreciated how Pig Destroyer can take the genre in directions like this without it feeling too preachy or heavy-handed or even really out of place. I mean, this kind of music can potentially get kinda ugly when people take it too seriously, but these guys have always towed that particular line very well in their music. Props where they're due. They make it look way easier than it actually is. And overall, this record really is one of the better metal releases I think we've gotten in 2018. It's an album of rampaging heaviness, of interesting construction, and even a few curveballs thrown in there just to keep things nice and spicy. Catherine Katz, formerly of Agoraphobic Nosebleed, shows up on Terminal Itch and Concrete Beast, and it's always great hearing from her. And Jason Hodges from Ilium appears on The Adventures of Jason and JR. Makes sense. A nice, sillier song off the record to help alleviate that tone a bit. Grindcore and extreme music like this is always gonna be very niche, just because of the weird, strange, and often gruesome places it goes to, but I'll be damned if Pig Destroyer hasn't stayed consistent in delivering some of the best music these genres can produce, and they remain a vital player in proving that some extremely great music can come from this scene. Just all around good stuff here. I'm really digging this. Headcage gets 4.5 destroyed pigs out of 5. Okay, wow, I got a ton of requests for this one. Like, this has been the big hit album this year. Like, regardless of whatever I may have to say about it, this shit is about as hot as it gets for 2018. Both critically and commercially, this album's been kind of a huge success. Really, pretty much the only thing this album doesn't have right now is my virtually meaningless stamp of approval, because everybody loves this one. Everybody. Right? Well, I mean, it's fine. Don't get me wrong, I'm not about to trash this record or anything, but it's okay. It's fine. Like I said, it's okay. It's a metalcore kind of post-hardcore kind of thing. It's loud, raucous, and admittedly a lot of fun. It's a fun record for sure. I mean, a lot of the playing here is super bouncy and tight. I feel like these guys make for a hell of a live act, so that's definitely a show you would want to catch. There's just a hell of a lot to respect and admire about this band. I understand the hype for sure. While this probably isn't gonna make my best of the year list, I do get why others are heaping so much praise upon it. But this kinda isn't my jam, is all I'm saying. I mean, while the music itself is pretty legit, and the guys can certainly play and perform, I don't know, I've just heard better this year. Like, not extremely better. I could easily see these guys making my best of the year list somewhere down the line, but here, I just wasn't 100% feeling it. I'm sorry. See, Ice Nine Kills went with kind of a weird concept for this record. Even if you haven't heard a single song off of this album, you've probably at least heard what that general concept is. And even if you haven't, one look at this album cover, one look at this album title, and hearing song titles such as Stabbing in the Dark, Enjoy Your Slay, Merry Axmas, hey, that one's just in time for the holidays. You can probably guess what we're going at here. Every song on this album is about a horror movie. And see, while that is totally one of those gimmicks that would probably get most people's ears to perk right up, it's not something that really works for me. And I've seen my fair share of horror movies, believe me. I had friends and relatives who were way into the genre growing up. They sat me down in front of all of the best of them, and even many of the not so best. And while I don't hate the genre by any means, it's just really not my thing. But even if I was a big horror fan, I still think I wouldn't get much out of this album because, well, for one, an album like this really opens the door for the guys to potentially use a lot of classic, iconic horror movie songs and musical cues. I only remember hearing just one, and it was the Jaws theme. And that thing's only like 2 notes. That feels like a big missed opportunity here. And for 2, well, at the end of the day, it's just an album about a bunch of horror movies. It's fan service is what it is. It's a bunch of fanboys drooling and nerding way the fuck out over a niche hobby that they're really into. Again, there's not a damn thing wrong with that. I mean, that is precisely what we're doing right now at this very fucking moment. But remember when I reviewed Pentakill, that metal band that's actually based off of League of Legends lore? And you know, all their songs were about stuff in and from the game. In a weird way, that's kind of where I am with the Silver Scream, too. The music is fine, but the lyrics are very laser focused on a topic I don't have a lot of interest in, and as a result, it's just hard for me to get personally invested. I know a lot of people will probably be into this album. Hey, more power to ya. I feel ya on this one. I don't know. Maybe I'll be more into their action movie or romantic comedy album. The Silver Scream gets 3.5 full moon pictures out of 5. Crossfaith, that's the name of this band? Oh god, it's either a Christian band with absolutely zero subtlety or possibly a Japanese group. Oh, please be Japanese, please be Japanese, please be Japanese. Oh, yes! All right! Okay, cool. Now, let's hear what we got. I tend to love a lot of the J-rock that I get my hands on, so I'm sure this will be... Hey, can I still trade this in for a Christian rock band or something? This is something else. See, Crossfaith is a metal group that is a little on the eccentric side. And no, not just because a lot of Japanese metal is itself very eccentric. See, this band is a very odd amalgamation of metal, metalcore, and of all things, EDM and dubstep. There's a lot of electronica injected into the grooves and beats. Though when I say injected, I mean more so forced in with a crowbar and a lot of elbow grease. The electronica stuff really does not blend terribly well with a lot of the heavier elements. Thank God it's not in like an America Mania kind of way. This isn't an Imagine Dragon style of album with that problem. It's not sleepy or lazy or lethargic. It's just very disjointed. The electronic elements aren't really integrated with a lot of smoothness or consistency with the rest of the music. So when a big dubstep style drop or a huge EDM intro comes swelling into the song, it sets you up for one mood and then switches on a dime to a completely heavier song. It's very back and forth, this album. There's just not a lot of harmony at play with the different styles of music. It almost sounds like 2 or 3 different bands here all trying to fight for the front end of the mix. And the times where they do get close to working well together, there's just this messy, overly chaotic, just sloppy kind of sound. There just isn't a very good mesh of all the different styles at play. It's like ordering a Blizzard that just has an entire Snickers bar stuck in the middle of it. The EDM elements have a tendency to get in the way of the heavier stuff, and vice versa. I can hear some people already arguing, well, the genres just don't blend together anyway. What would you expect? I don't buy that. You want to know why? Bloodstained Child, that's why. Those guys, along with a lot of other Japanese metal bands of their ilk, have been doing this kind of sound and making it look straight up easy for years now. There is no real reason why this couldn't have worked, but yeah, I was really not feeling this. It's not the most atrocious album I've heard this year. Apparently some outlets are giving this an outright paddling. I wouldn't say it deserves the cricket bat treatment, but it's not very good. And their cover of Faint at the very end of the record, yeah, no. I get what you were going for, but no. Faint in and of itself is a very hard song to cover in the first place. In the hands of these guys, this isn't worst of the year material, not for me at least, but it's not what I'd call good. I'm just saying, Japan is capable of so much better than this. Ex Machina gets 2 Snickers bars in your Blizzard out of 5. Yeah, we ended up getting 2 Japanese acts Patreon requested this time around, which is cool because I'm usually lucky to get anything at all. But not everything that comes from Japan is solid gold, you know, just take a look at Garzy's Wing, Death Crimson, or indeed the very last album we reviewed. And there isn't nearly as much background information on these guys to go off of, at least not anything in English, mind. So we are feeling a little bit in the dark with these guys, but as a bit of a background feeler, I actually decided to listen to the rest of their back catalog before jumping into this one. Thankfully, it's not terribly huge. These guys are still a fairly new band. And you know what? Their previous album, Wabi Sabi, pretty interesting. It's some very melodic metalcore kind of stuff with an almost somber kind of loftiness to it. Imagine a combination of A Day to Remember and of all things like Deftones, and then give it big ol' anime eyes, and that's basically what you got on your hands. It's interesting. That really won me over. Cleaner, poppier melodies with just enough heaviness and darkness to make for an interesting as hell cocktail. But then I went further back and listened to their first album, or at least what Spotify told me was their first album. Ooh, wow. I wasn't even 100% sure it was the same band. That totally is a thing that happens on most streaming services. Poor Hurt. That album was more straight up metalcore. It was a lot edgier, a lot heavier. The atmosphere and color was almost completely absent. It felt like a different beast. Well, of course it sounds different, I thought to myself. They grew and changed their sound around for their second album. They evolved and wanted to move in a different direction. Or at least that's what I thought until I finally got to this album, which... wow, this really is all over the place. Translated, that's their styling on the song titles, not mine, is again straight up metalcore, but then Spine comes in and turns into something that's borderline pop punk. Then Right and Left comes on, and it's pop punk that's almost entirely devoid of the punk. And then Found and Lost transitions right back into the heavy metalcore stuff. And then there's the Happy song, which is led by a bouncy, up-tempo, jaunty as fuck little piano riff. It almost feels like Dick Van Dyke should be singing along to it. This album has a small problem with tone. This feels schizophrenic as all hell. And that's when I think I figured out what this band's issue was. These guys have no idea what they want to be. They obviously started out as a more metalcore-y, more straightforward act, then decided to shift to something more atmospheric, but they weren't feeling that either, or there was pressure from their label or something, so now they're just trying to straight up stuff pop elements into their sound. I admit it does lead to some interesting songs. For as weird as the Happy song is, I actually do kind of like it. And some of their other poppier stuff like Right and Left and Uplifted are pretty decent, if not full-blown amazing. But I get the impression that this is a band that's just throwing stuff at the wall and trying to see what sticks. They don't seem to have much direction or idea as to how they should sound like or what kind of band they really should be. It just feels more unfocused than groundbreaking. I didn't mind this album necessarily, but honestly, their second album is still way better. It's hard to gauge what these guys are really capable of, but whatever that may be, they haven't really unlocked it on this particular album. Spaces gets 3 unnecessary spaces out of 5. Oh shit. Oh shit. I'm kind of at a loss with this particular review. See, I already kinda, sorta, not really reviewed this album, believe it or not. Not this album specifically, but, well, remember Covet? Yeah, they were another Patreon request I got earlier in the year. That super quirky, insanely well-played instrumental math rock thing. That was blazing new ground for the show because that was the first time I'd ever reviewed an instrumental group. I really liked Covet. I'm actually still debating as to whether or not they deserve, like, an honorable mention spot or something on my 2018 list. I was really impressed. I dug it. But Covet really stuck out through their absolutely gorgeous guitar work. Care of Yvette Young. Seriously, that girl is a goddamn virtuoso. Covet just has so much more identity, color, and interesting stuff going on for them. Why spend so much time talking about them when I should talk about the band that's on the title card? Well, by now you guys should know that's a cheeky little trick I pull when a band doesn't give me a lot to say. Hell, we did it on the very last video I put out. But yeah, Polyphia? They, too, are an instrumental math rock band that primarily deals in catchy, crazy guitar licks and... well, fuck, you remember what I ended up saying in my review of Covet? How an instrumental band in and of themselves doesn't give me much to say because they themselves aren't saying anything? Yeah, imagine how much that problem compounds when you have to review a band similar to a band that didn't say anything. Like, I don't know, it's gonna be hard to do this review without just repeating a lot of the stuff I said about Covet. The playing isn't as good as on Covet's album, I'll say that much. These guys tend to repeat their riffs and hooks way more often, whereas Covet would just annihilate your mind with the different directions they would go in. It was hard to keep up. These guys, it's a bit more straightforward. I mean, that's something different. This album also has a lot of features on it. A lot of other people from other bands jump into certain tracks. Not that it really mattered. None of these features, with one small exception, really made any of their particular tracks stand out from one another. Hell, there was even one song with vocals on it, but I mean, it may as well have stayed an instrumental. It was just generic girl you so fine shits. I don't even think the guy swears on that particular track, and I'm pretty sure it's the only one that had any real vocals, so God only knows why that parental advisory sticker is there. I mean, they're not bad, they're not hacks or anything, but personally, I'll take, like, Covet over this any day of the week. And it's not just because Covet got to me first here. See, fun fact, remember those features I mentioned? Well, out of all the features on this album, one of them actually is from Yvette Young. Yeah, she shows up on Rich Kids, and oh god, she shows these guys up so hard on that track. It's almost, oh, you almost feel bad for them, you know? Hell, having her feature here was maybe the worst thing they could have done, because that highlights perfectly how much more interesting, engaging, and provoking her stuff is compared to theirs. And she's doing it on their own freaking album. I mean, oh, that track in and of itself could serve as my review. Again, this isn't incompetent by any means. Hey, if this weird little niche of instrumental math rock is your thing, you'll get a kick out of this. Don't let me, dissuade you from it, but it isn't gonna melt your brain like Covet's music is. But in my book, that also makes it kind of more uninteresting. It's fine, but it ain't that good. New Levels, New Devils gets 3 levels out of 5 devils. Oh, hey, speaking of devils, Behemoth! Oh yeah, their last album, The Satanist, was one of the best albums that the black death metal genre has ever pumped out, and I'm honestly not much of a black metal guy, believe it or not. I mean, a black metal album really has to be stunningly good for me to go as gaga over it as I did for The Satanist, but man, that album really was just as fucking good as everyone said it was. Hell, that album actually encouraged me to go back and explore some of their back catalog, and yeah, Behemoth has been doing really good stuff. They really are one of the best in the business. Demigod, The Apostasy, Evangelion, no, not that one. These guys have a lot of good stuff. As long as they didn't drastically change their sound or anything for this next album, I figured these guys would be a shoo-in for some high praise this year. Yeah, about that. Well, okay, first off, don't let my shift in tone be too disquieting here. I still really enjoyed I Loved You at Your Darkest, and there is a lot here that remains as solid as it ever was. Nergal, who I'm still gonna insist on pronouncing as Nurgle, because that's just too damn cute. Nurgle! Still has some of the most ferocious screaming in metal, and his lyrics and guitar playing remain as sharp and intense and as pitch black as they ever have, and Orion and Inferno's backup on the rhythm section is as brutal and as tight as it ever was. This album isn't like them going pop punk or anything. It's still black metal, it's still intense, but they did go for a different feel on this album. This thing almost sounds like, oh, this is gonna sound really weird, but this almost kind of sounds like a selling out record for Behemoth. I mean, as close as they could possibly get to making something like that. Like, this still isn't gonna get played on the radio. This isn't that kind of selling out, don't worry. But I mean, like I mentioned, The Satanist was really successful, and it brought these guys way more attention than they ever had. Hell, that album got them lots of props and attention from people outside of the blackened metal scenes. I feel like on this album, they tried to capitalize on that momentum a little bit. I mean, that children's choir on God Equals Dog. Not to mention, there's a song on here called God Equals Dog. And also the weird God Equals Dog dog food commercials they did. This is probably one of the goofier songs I've ever heard them do. And hey, you know, more power to them. I honestly enjoy the hell out of this track, but yeah, black metal, even if it's from a band that's arguably not true black metal, like Behemoth sometimes gets, I don't know, it usually doesn't go this silly. Black metal is all about scary. And I'm not talking about like the Rob Zombie fun scary kind of sense. I mean the, wow, maybe little Billy should be seeing a therapist kind of sense. If I can borrow an apt metaphor from Ice Nine Kills here, your more traditional metal bands, they're more Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. Behemoth is more Solo. And a lot of this album isn't quite like that. A lot of the music is much more slower and spaced out. I mean, the thing I usually love most about Behemoth is I can pick any one of their albums, push play, and just let the intensity and insanity just wash over me in a constant, never-ending stream of... This album, on the other hand, it has a few more breakdowns, it has a few more slower moments. The music feels more traditionally paced than a lot of their stuff usually is. I can almost feel some traditional rock influences here and there. This is just not the most extreme version of this band we've ever heard. But again, it's not like timid by any means. This is still Behemoth, and it is still very, very dark, evil, brutal. Like I say, you aren't going to hear this on AM radio. It's still what you would look for in a black metal release. It's not a bad album, but it is a very different one for this band, at least compared to what I'm usually used to hearing from these guys. I still enjoyed it, but I don't know, as a result of the shift in sound, this didn't end up being an album I came back to a lot this year. It's experimental and interesting, but I don't know, this kind of thing, it's not what I usually come to the band for. Hell, this isn't even the best black metal album I've heard this year. For me, that honor goes to Death Heaven. And that sentence has probably officially killed the comment section of this video, so I should probably just wrap it up. Hey, it's still a solid outing from these guys. It's no reason to jump off the Behemoth bandwagon or anything. I mean, the Satanist was going to be a very hard bar to clear, but this fell a little bit shorter than I was hoping it would fall. Not much, mind, but still. I Loved You at Your Darkest gets 4 Purina Chows out of 5.